spreadsheet that I'd like for you to help me out with here. We have a bonus structure that is different depending on how much they sell.
Okay.
And someone told me to do an if-then statement and have another one inside that and another one inside that.
Yeah.
And I tried that and I could not. It just got so complicated I didn't know which end was up.
You can do embedded if-thens where your then becomes another if-then that has another comparison and so forth. It can get kind of hairy.
It does.
Very hairy. You luckily don't have to do that. We can do a vLookup.
Okay.
And the vLookup will tell it to go and look at the scenarios, your bonus structure basically.
Okay.
Which I see you have laid out in this spreadsheet. So that's nice. You've got it down there in cells C14 through D18. And I noticed when you highlighted it that up there in our name box, you have actually named this range. One of the things we do is we create this structure that tells us what we want. So I'm assuming that if they sell anything from $9,999 down, that their bonus is $50, right?
Correct. That is exactly
And
right.
then from $10,000 to $19,999, it's $200 and so forth. So you've created this structure, and when you're going to use a vLookup, you create a little table like that, and it tells us what values we're looking for and what value you want the formula to produce.
Okay.
First thing you do is you name it, and you have done that. But let's, just so people are aware, tell me how you named that.
So what I did, just so that I could keep myself straight when I was trying to do that embedded if-then statement, is I laid out what the sales needed to be and then what the bonus would be. And I highlighted this and then clicked in the name box and just typed in bonus structure so that I was attempting to use that range, but it just didn't work out.
Okay. Well, it's good you've named the range, and it's good that we've showed everybody else how to do that because we need the named range to use the vLookup.
Okay, good.
All right. So I am assuming in cell F2 is where you want to start putting this bonus information in, right?
I do.
All right. So this is a function called vLookup.
Okay.
It is a lookup and reference function. So let's go back to our ribbon in the Formulas tab, and you'll notice lookup and reference. If you click on that drop down, there's all sorts of lookup and reference types of functions in here, but we're going to look at the one called vLookup.
Okay.
So if you click on that, here is our function arguments dialog box, and of course we remember that the items that are in bold are required.
Right, right.
And then if that last one, range lookup, is not in bold, so you don't necessarily have to input that into this formula. So let's look at what we need. Lookup value. The first thing we want to do is look for what value we're going to compare against. So we're comparing against what, your sales?
Yes, we're looking at the sales.
Okay, so let's choose that cell there, cell D2. And then what we need to tell it is where to look to compare it.
Okay.
All right, so your table array is where you have that bonus structure.
Okay, well, do I just need the numbers or do I select the whole thing?
You can select the whole thing. And notice it puts in the name. That's why it's really important to have that name there. Now here's the important part, column index number. What it's saying is, okay, I have this bonus structure, the cell range. What information do you want me to produce? In other words, what goes into this cell? Well, you want the bonus to show up in the cell, right?
So would I tell them column D?
You're going to tell it what number of column, because it says column index number. So is it your first column or your second column?
It would be column 2.
Right.
There we go.
Now let's just for a second look at that last one, range lookup. It's not required. Let's see what it says. It says range lookup is a lookup value to find the closest match in the first column, sorted in ascending order. In true, it's omitted, so it's just going to look for the closest match. If you put false here, it has to match exactly. So in other words, if you had some kind of contest going on where you only sell $10,000, you get this $200, but if you sell $10,001, you don't get the $200 bonus. So if it's got to match the number exactly in the first column, then we would put false in here.
Okay.
But since it doesn't, I'm assuming that if I sell from $10,000 to $19,999, that I still get my $200 bonus, right?
That is exactly right.
All right, so we don't want to put false in there. We're going to leave it blank, or you could type in true, but it's not required.
Okay.
All right, so let's click OK. And that first person received the $50 bonus, and let's look at their sales. Yeah, it's between 0 and 10,000. Go on and copy the formula down.
All right.
And there you go.
Oh, awesome. So David got 27,800, which is in between these two, so he got 400.
Right.
That worked.
Isn't that so much easier than doing if then inside an if then inside an if then?
It is. Not only is it easier, it is just less confusing.
Right.
I was afraid that I was going to make a mistake, and this is a lot more clear.
Yes, it's a very simple process. Now, we were looking at these in the lookup and reference, so we saw those types of functions. Just briefly want to mention a few other functions that are available to us that we're not actually doing in these modules.
Okay.
If you go over to more functions.
All right, right here.
We saw that there's statistical, and we looked at some statistical functions earlier. Engineering, pretty much the people who use engineering are engineers, and they know what these functions do, so those are available to them.
Okay.
Q functions are kind of like engineering functions. If you're using them, you probably know how to use them already. But for the rest of us, if you're importing or analyzing data from a SQL server, you would use those Q functions often to do that analysis. Now, if you go down to information, this type of function gives you information about your background, your environment that you're working in. For example, the cell function will tell you about the cell that you've put the function into. There is it tells you, returns information about the formatting or the location or the contents of the cell. There are functions in there that tell you about the environment. Info tells you, for example, what version of Windows you may be working in and that type of thing. So it's a way to find out a little bit about your environment, especially if you're working in a different computer than you're normally working on.
Okay.
Compatibility, we mentioned this in an earlier module. There are functions that come from earlier versions of Excel that have been rewritten in this version. And so these are the old functions. And if you're using an Excel spreadsheet that used these functions, it still will work for you.
Okay.
The key here is eventually they're going to phase those out. So you need to find what the new function's called and transfer your functions into the new formatting and new wording.
Okay.
There are obviously quite a few functions here. In fact, they say there's over 400 functions in Excel.
Oh, wow, that's a
so
lot.
there's no way I can show all of them to you. What I suggest is if we haven't covered one that you want, remember, let's just pop one up with the function arguments box popping up. So let's just go to statistical and pop up average deviation there. When that function arguments box pops up, keep in mind it tells you what the function does. If you click in each one of the text boxes, it'll tell you what kind of information it's looking for. And of course, down in the bottom left corner, help on this function. Go on and click that. It takes you to the help menus and takes you into information about that particular function. So you have the information available to you as you begin to explore more with functions, but we've tried to show you some of the more common ones.
Okay.